Elvis Presley is a name everyone knows. He was the king of rock and roll. His music changed the world. His face is one of the most famous on the planet. But there's a shadow that follows this incredible light. It's a strange dark shadow, and it connects him to events that have nothing to do with music. It connects him to mysteries, to disappearances, to unsolved murders. How can one man, a singer from Tupelo, Mississippi, be linked to so many dark corners of American life? It's not about Blaine. He wasn't a criminal. It's about the size of his fame. His celebrity was so massive it became its own weather system. It pulled people, events, and strange coincidences into its orbit. An Elvis impersonator vanishes. A book about his ghost is found at the scene of a famous child murder. A young actress with his name in her diary is found dead. These are not movie plots. They are real cases. They remain unsolved. The connections are often weird. They are sometimes thin, like a single thread you can barely see. But the thread is there. It ties the glitter of Las Vegas and the quiet streets of suburbia to the same man. We are going to look at 16 of these cases. These are stories of people whose lives ended in mystery. And somewhere in the background, you can almost hear a faint echo of Heartbreak Hotel. Why does the king's legacy keep intersecting with the country's coldest cases? What is it about Elvis that attracts such darkness? Number 16, Why was a book about Elvis found at the scene? The JonBenét Ramsey case is a national obsession. It has been for decades. On December 26, 1996, 6-year-old JonBenét was found murdered in the basement of her family's home in Boulder, Colorado. The details are famous. The confusing 911 call from her mother, Patsy. The bizarre 3-page ransom note found on the kitchen stairs. The note demanded $118,000, a strange sum that happened to be very close to a recent work bonus received by her father, John. For hours, police and family treated it as a kidnapping. They waited for a call that never came. It was John Ramsey who finally found his daughter's body, covered by a white blanket, in a small windowless room in the basement. She had been strangled and had a skull fracture. The investigation was a mess from the start. The crime scene was contaminated. Friends and family were allowed to wander through the house, cleaning surfaces and potentially destroying evidence. The police were criticized for focusing too heavily on the parents, John and Patsy, as the primary suspects. The public was divided. Some were convinced a family member was responsible. Others believed an intruder had committed the horrific crime. The case grew into a media circus fueled by videos of JonBenét competing in child beauty pageants. She was a tiny made-up star, and her death became a symbol of something dark in the American dream. Amid the chaos and the thousands of pieces of evidence, one detail stands out for its sheer strangeness. During the search of the sprawling Ramsey home, investigators found a book on a nightstand. It was not a common book. The title was A Mind of My Own the Woman, who was the reincarnation of Elvis Presley. The author was a woman named Beulah who claimed to be channeling the spirit of Elvis. It was a fringe book, something you wouldn't expect to find in the average home. The discovery was noted by investigators and later mentioned in books about the case, including Lawrence Schiller's exhaustive 1999 account, Perfect Murder, Perfect Town. The Elvis connection adds another layer of high strangeness to an already bizarre case. The Ramsey home was filled with clues that seemed to point everywhere and nowhere. The long, rambling ransom note was written on a notepad from inside the house. The garrote used to strangle JonBenét was fashioned from a broken paintbrush belonging to Patsy. Fibers from her mother's sweater were found on the duct tape over JonBenét's mouth. But DNA found on her underwear didn't match anyone in the family or anyone in any criminal database. It belonged to an unknown male. So what about the book? In the grand scheme of the investigation, it was a minor detail. It was never considered a major clue. But it's a weird detail. Who was reading it? Why was it in the house? Was it Patsy's, John's? Did it belong to a friend? Former FBI profiler John Douglas, who consulted on the case, believed an intruder was responsible. He focused on the psychological profile of the killer. Could a book about channeling Elvis Presley offer a glimpse into the mindset of someone in that house? Perhaps not the killer, but a resident. It suggests an interest in the unusual, the spiritual, the bizarre. It's a strange cultural artifact to find at the center of one of America's most haunting unsolved murders. The case remains open. The book sits on an evidence list, a weird, unexplained footnote. What does the presence of such an unusual book say about the atmosphere inside the Ramsey home? If it wasn't a clue, was its discovery a pure coincidence, or did it reflect a hidden side of the family's life? Could the killer have seen the book, or even brought it with them as some sort of bizarre calling card? Or is it simply the most surreal red herring in the history of American true crime? Number 15. Did a rising star get too close to the king's world? Bobby Fuller was on the verge of superstardom. In 1966, his band, the Bobby Fuller Four, had a massive hit. Their cover of I Fought the Law was all over the radio. It was a raw, energetic song that captured the rebellious spirit of the time. Fuller was 23 years old, handsome, and talented. He was a Texas kid who had come to Los Angeles to make it big, and he was succeeding. And he was often compared to another Texas musician who had shaken up the world, Buddy Holly. And like Holly, Fuller's life ended suddenly and tragically. On July 18th, 1966, Bobby Fuller was found dead in his mother's car, parked outside his Hollywood apartment. The scene was strange from the start. His body was in the front seat, he was covered in gasoline. A rubber siphon tube was also in the car. The windows were rolled up on a hot July day. The Los Angeles County Coroner's Office initially ruled his death a suicide. The official cause was asphyxia due to inhalation of gasoline, but no one who knew Bobby believed it. He was not depressed, his career was taking off, he was excited about the future. The details didn't add up. Friends who found the body said he was bruised and battered. One of his fingers was broken. These injuries were not mentioned in the official autopsy report. The police investigation was minimal. They seemed eager to close the case. This led to decades of speculation. Most people believe Bobby Fuller was murdered. The question is, by whom and why? Theories abound. One popular theory involves the mob. Fuller was signed to Delphi Records, a label run by Bob Keane. Some stories suggest Keane had ties to organized crime and that Fuller wanted out of his contract. Perhaps he was killed for trying to leave. Another theory involves a jealous boyfriend or a dispute over a woman. The Elvis connection is more atmospheric, but it's there. Fuller existed in the same musical world as Elvis. He was a rock and roll star on the rise in a town where Elvis was already a king. Some researchers, like author Miriam Linna, who wrote the book I Fought the Law, the Life and Strange Death of Bobby Fuller, have explored connections between Fuller's death and powerful figures in the music industry. Elvis's manager, Colonel Tom Parker, was one of the most powerful men in music. The business was notoriously ruthless. Young stars were chewed up and spit out. There were rumors that Fuller had a girlfriend who was also involved with a dangerous, well-connected man. The strangest part is how Fuller's death was handled. It was quickly swept under the rug. The Lapti in the 1960s was known for corruption. Many believe they were paid to look the other way. The case files have since disappeared. The official narrative just doesn't hold up. Suicide by drinking gasoline is extremely rare and an agonizing way to die. The scene seemed staged. The gasoline could have been poured on him to destroy evidence. He was found in his car, but he didn't drive it there. He couldn't have. The car keys weren't even in his pocket. The police said they found them later, but witnesses on the scene disputed that. His death remains one of Hollywood's darkest unsolved mysteries. He was a star who got too bright, too fast, and was extinguished. Was Bobby Fuller's death covered up by powerful figures in the Los Angeles music scene of the 1960s? Could his desire to control his own career have put him in conflict with people he couldn't beat? Why did the Lapti seem so uninterested in investigating his death as a homicide, despite clear evidence of foul play? And did he cross the line with someone connected to the bigger stars of the era like Elvis? Number 14 was an Elvis impersonator's disappearance, a final act. Dean Goss was not a famous Elvis impersonator. He wasn't playing sold-out shows in Las Vegas. He was a young man from a small town in Minnesota. He loved Elvis. He styled his hair like Elvis. He practiced the famous sneer. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, being an Elvis tribute artist was a popular way to make a living. Elvis had died in 1977, and the world was hungry for any connection to the king. For Goss, it was more than a job. It was a passion. In May 1983, Dean Goss was 22 years old. He was living in Onamia, Minnesota. He told his family he was going to drive to a gig. It was supposed to be in a nearby town. He packed his Elvis jumpsuit, got in his car, and drove off. He was never seen again. His car was found a few days later. It was abandoned on the side of a road in Mille Lacs County. There were no signs of a struggle. His wallet was still in the car. His Elvis costume was gone. Dean Goss had simply vanished. The police investigation went nowhere. They had no leads. There was no evidence of foul play at the scene where the car was found, but a 22-year-old man with a steady gig doesn't just disappear. His family was certain something bad had happened to him. They described him as a reliable, happy person. He was close to his mother. He wouldn't have just left without a word. They searched the woods near where his car was found. They followed up on every tip. Nothing. It was as if Dean Goss had performed a final, disappearing act. The Elvis connection is the entire story. Goss's identity was wrapped up in being Elvis. His disappearance is part of a strange pattern of tragedies involving Elvis impersonators. It seems like a dangerous profession. Some have been murdered, some have died in strange accidents. It's as if trying to inhabit the life of someone so famous comes with its own risks. Did Dean Goss run into trouble on the road? The life of a traveling performer can be lonely and dangerous. You meet a lot of people in bars and small-town venues. Not all of them are friendly. Over the years, theories have emerged. Did he get into an argument with someone at a bar after his show? Did he accept a ride from the wrong person? Or did he decide to start a new life? The idea that he simply walked away from his life seems unlikely. He left his wallet behind. Why would he do that? And where would he go? He had no other skills besides being Elvis. His family never gave up hope. They kept his case in the public eye for years. But as time passed, the trail grew cold. The mystery of what happened to the young Elvis from Onamia, Minnesota remains unsolved. Did Dean Goss's work as an Elvis impersonator put him in a dangerous situation that led to his disappearance? Could he have been the victim of a random act of violence on a dark Minnesota road? Is it possible that he was targeted by someone who was obsessed with Elvis in a negative way? Or did he stage his own disappearance, taking his Elvis persona with him to start a new unknown chapter of his life? Number 13. Did the mob silence a union boss in Elvis's Vegas? Jimmy Hoffa was one of the most powerful men in America. As the president of the Teamsters Union, he controlled a massive and influential organization. He was also deeply connected to organized crime. The Teamsters pension fund was like a private bank for the mob. They used it to finance the construction of casinos in Las Vegas. This is where the world of Jimmy Hoffa and the world of Elvis Presley intersect. Elvis began his famous Las Vegas residency at the International Hotel in 1969. The International was one of the many Vegas properties built with loans from the Teamsters pension fund. The city was run by the mob. The casinos, the shows, the money, it was all intertwined with figures like Meyer Lansky, Mo Dalitz, and Anthony Tony Pro Provenzano. Elvis was the biggest star in town. His manager, Colonel Tom Parker, was a notorious gambler. He was known to lose $1 million in a single night at the tables. His gambling debts were often forgiven by the casinos. It was the price of keeping the king in their showroom. This put Parker, and by extension Elvis, in debt to the very people Hoffa was connected to. On July 30th, 1975, Jimmy Hoffa disappeared. He was last seen in the parking lot of the Machu's Red Fox restaurant in Bloomfield Township, Michigan. He was supposed to be meeting with two mafia figures, Anthony Giacolone and Anthony Provenzano. Hoffa was trying to regain power in the Teamsters Union after a stint in prison. The mob didn't want him back. They had a cozy relationship with the new leadership. They feared Hoffa would disrupt their access to the pension fund. Hoffa got into a car with several men and was never seen again. He was declared legally dead in 1982. His body has never been found. The investigation into his disappearance is one of the most extensive in American history. The FBI has chased down thousands of leads, they've dug up farms and searched under bridges. The prevailing theory is that Hoffa was murdered by the mob to prevent him from talking to federal investigators or reclaiming his power. The book I Heard You Paint Houses by Charles Brandt, which was the basis for the Martin Scorsese film The Irishman, details a confession from mobster Frank Sheeran. Sheeran claimed he was the one who killed Hoffa on orders from the mafia, but even his confession is disputed, and the case remains officially unsolved. The Elvis connection is indirect but significant. The world that made Elvis a Las Vegas icon was the same world that likely had Jimmy Hoffa killed. The money that flowed through those casinos, the power that was wielded behind the scenes, it was all part of the same system. Colonel Parker's deep gambling debts made him vulnerable to the mob. Did they ever use this leverage to influence Elvis? We don't know. But it's a fact that Elvis's career in the 1970s was deeply tied to a city and an industry controlled by the same forces that silenced Jimmy Hoffa. The glitz and glamour of Elvis's shows had a very dark and dangerous backdrop. How much did Colonel Tom Parker's gambling debts to mob-run casinos influence Elvis's career decisions? Were there ever direct threats made against Elvis or his manager by the figures who ran Las Vegas? Could information about the mob's control of the entertainment industry be the reason Jimmy Hoffa was silenced? And is it possible that somewhere in the vast FBI files on the Hoffa case, there are mentions of the biggest star in Vegas? Number 12. Who killed the Hollywood starlet with the secret diary? Krista Helm was a young actress trying to make it in Hollywood in the 1970s. She had small roles in shows like Wonder Woman and Starsky and Hutch. She was beautiful, ambitious, and she moved in powerful circles. She was known for dating famous men. Her social life was a whirlwind of parties, movie sets, and exclusive clubs. She was living the Hollywood dream, but it would soon turn into a nightmare. On February 12, 1977, Krista Helm was brutally murdered. She was stabbed and bludgeoned to death outside her agent's home in West Hollywood. The attack was violent and personal. The killer was waiting for her. She was stabbed more than 30 times. It was a clear act of rage. The police had few clues. There were no witnesses. The murder weapon was never found. The case quickly went cold. The most intriguing part of the mystery is what was missing from her apartment. Krista was known to keep a detailed diary. She recorded her encounters with famous men. The diary reportedly contained names of movie stars, musicians, and powerful politicians. She also made tape recordings of her conversations with these men. Friends said she was planning to write a tell-all book. She believed her diary was her insurance policy. She thought it would protect her. Instead, it may have been her death warrant. After her murder, her apartment was searched. The diary and the tapes were gone. The Elvis connection comes from rumors about who was in that diary. Krista Helm was known to have dated a number of celebrities. Names like Joe Namath, Warren Beatty, and Mick Jagger were all linked to her. According to some sources, including the investigative TV show Unsolved Mysteries, which profiled her case, Elvis Presley was another name rumored to be in her diary. And Elvis was in Los Angeles frequently during this period. He was known to have relationships with young actresses. It's plausible that their paths crossed. If Krista had written about a relationship with Elvis or recorded their conversations, that information would have been explosive. In early 1977, just before her death, Elvis's health was declining. His public image was carefully controlled by Colonel Tom Parker. A tell-all book from a former lover could have been a disaster. Did someone kill Krista Helm to get her diary and tapes? The police certainly believed so. The murder wasn't a random robbery. It was a targeted assassination. Someone wanted to silence her. The list of potential suspects was long. It could have been any one of the powerful men she was involved with, or someone working for them. The case remains one of Hollywood's most chilling unsolved murders. Krista Helm got too close to the flame of celebrity and she was burned. Her secrets died with her. Was Elvis Presley's name really in Krista Helm's diary? If so, what did she write about him? Could someone connected to Elvis, desperate to protect his image, have been responsible for her murder? Why have the police never been able to close this case, despite the high-profile nature of the victim and the potential suspects? And where are the diary and the tapes today? This number 11 was a fire at the Hilton, a message for the king. In 1971, Elvis was at the peak of his Las Vegas career. His residency at the International Hotel was the hottest ticket in town. The hotel was soon renamed the Las Vegas Hilton. Elvis was its crown jewel. He sold out every show. He lived in the penthouse suite. The hotel was his kingdom. But on February 9th, 1971, that kingdom was threatened by a disaster. A massive fire broke out at the Las Vegas Hilton. It started on the 8th floor and quickly spread. The fire was devastating. It killed 8 people and injured hundreds more. The hotel was packed with guests. The fire caused chaos and panic. Firefighters struggled to control the blaze in the massive high-rise building. It was one of the worst hotel fires in American history at the time. The official cause of the fire was determined to be arson. Investigators found evidence that the fire was deliberately set in an 8th floor utility closet. A busboy, a 23-year-old named Philip Bruce Klein, was arrested and charged with arson and murder. He had a history of setting small fires. He was tried and convicted. He was sentenced to life in prison. On the surface, the case seemed solved. but many people believe the story is more complicated. The connection to Elvis is the context. The fire happened at his hotel. He was not there at the time, but he was the face of the Hilton. In the world of 1970s Las Vegas, nothing happened by accident. The city was still heavily influenced by the mob. The casinos were their territory. Arson was a classic mob tactic. It was used for insurance fraud. It was used to send a message. Was the fire at the Hilton a message? And if so, for whom? Some researchers and authors, like those who have written about mob history in Las Vegas, have speculated that the busboy was a patsy. They suggest the fire was a professional job set by organized crime. Why would they do it? One theory is that it was an attempt to intimidate the hotel's owner, Kirk Kerkorian. Another is that it was related to a power struggle between different mob families. And a third, more direct theory connects it to Colonel Tom Parker. The Colonel's gambling habits were legendary. He owed huge sums of money to the casino. Was the fire a warning to the Colonel? A reminder of who was really in charge? The busboy, Philip Klein, maintained his innocence for years. He claimed he was coerced into a confession. The evidence against him was not overwhelming. The conviction rested heavily on his statement to police. The idea that a 23-year-old busboy could orchestrate such a massive and deadly fire on his own has always seemed unlikely to some investigators. The case is officially closed, but the questions remain. The fire at Elvis's Hotel Palace feels like more than just a random act of a troubled young man. Feels like a chapter in the dark, violent history of Las Vegas. Was Philip Bruce Klein truly responsible for the deadly Hilton fire, or was he a convenient scapegoat for a much larger conspiracy? Could the fire have been a message from the mob to Colonel Parker about his gambling debts? What did Elvis himself think about the fire at his hotel? And how close did the dark underbelly of Las Vegas come to consuming its biggest star? Number 10, were the Burger Chef murders a crime of a broken heart? On November 17, 1978, 4 young employees of a Burger Chef restaurant in Speedway, Indiana vanished. Their names were Jane Freet, Daniel Davis, Mark Flemons, and Ruth Shelton. They were last seen at closing time, around 11 p.m. The next morning, the restaurant was found unlocked. The back door was open. The purses and coats of the employees were still in the restaurant. Nearly $600 was missing from the safe, but there was no sign of the 4 young people. The police were baffled. It looked like a robbery, but the disappearance of all 4 employees was strange. 2 days later, their bodies were found in a wooded area about 20 miles away. They had been murdered. Jane Freet had been stabbed to death. The 3 male employees had been shot. The crime was brutal and senseless. It shocked the community of Speedway and became one of Indiana's most infamous cold cases. The investigation was massive, but it was plagued by mistakes and missed opportunities. The Elvis connection is a small but poignant detail. It centers on Jane Freet, the 20-year-old assistant manager. The murders happened in November 1978. Elvis had died just over a year earlier in August 1977. Jane was a massive Elvis fan. Her friends and family said she was devastated by his death. She had posters of him in her room. She listened to his music all the time. The timing of her murder, so soon after the death of her idol, adds a layer of tragedy to the story. Investigators have pursued many theories over the years. Was it a robbery gone wrong? Was it related to drugs? One of the victims, Mark Flemons, was believed to have been involved in a small-time drug deal. Another theory points to a local gang that was known for robbing fast food restaurants. There have been several promising suspects. One man confessed to the murders from prison, but his story didn't match the evidence and he later recanted. The case has been a source of frustration for law enforcement for over 4 decades. The Elvis detail doesn't solve the crime, but it paints a picture of the victims and the time. The late 1970s were a period of transition. The optimism of the 60s was gone. The death of Elvis felt like the end of an era for many people, including Jane Freet. Her love for Elvis was a big part of who she was. The crime is remembered for its brutality, but also for the innocence of the victims. They were just 4 young people working a late shift at a fast food restaurant. Their lives were cut short for reasons that are still unknown. The connection to Elvis is a sad footnote, a reminder of the personal world that was destroyed on that November night. Is it possible the killer or killers knew Jane Freet was an Elvis fan, and this played some unknown role in the crime? Could the emotional turmoil of the post-Elvis era have been a factor in the killer's mindset? Why has this case, with multiple victims and a clear crime scene, remained unsolved for so long? And will the families of the 4 victims ever get the answers they deserve? Number 9, what happened to the Phantom of the Grand Ole Opry? The Grand Ole Opry in Nashville, Tennessee is the mother church of country music. It's a place of legends. Hank Williams, Johnny Cash, Patsy Cline, they all graced its stage. In 1954, a young Elvis Presley also performed at the Opry. He sang his version of Blue Moon of Kentucky. The performance was not well received by the conservative Opry audience. The manager famously told Elvis he should go back to driving a truck. Elvis never played the Opry again, but there's another, darker story connected to the Opry from that era. It's the story of the Phantom of the Grand Ole Opry. For years, people who worked at the Ryman Auditorium, the home of the Opry for decades, reported strange occurrences. They heard footsteps in empty hallways. They saw shadowy figures in the wings of the stage. One of these figures was said to be the ghost of Hank Williams, but another was more mysterious. It was a shadowy man who was sometimes seen lurking in the upper balconies. The story of the Phantom is tied to an unsolved crime. In the 1960s, a string of thefts and acts of vandalism occurred at the Ryman. Instruments were stolen. Costumes were slashed. These acts were blamed on the Phantom. The person was never caught. The crimes were never solved. But the story takes a darker turn. According to some Opry legends, a stagehand disappeared from the Ryman in the early 1960s. He was working a late shift and simply vanished. He was never seen again. His disappearance was never solved. Some believe he was a victim of the mysterious Phantom. The Elvis connection is one of time and place. Elvis's single performance at the Opry places him at the heart of this legendary and sometimes haunted building. The Ryman Auditorium is a place full of history, music, and secrets. The unsolved crimes and the disappearance of the stagehand are part of its folklore. They speak to a time when the music business was rougher and more dangerous. The world of early rock and roll and country music was full of characters living on the edge. The story of the Phantom is more legend than fact. The details of the stagehand's disappearance are hard to verify in official records. But the stories have persisted for decades among Opry staff and musicians. They are part of the building's identity. The unsolved petty crimes and the more serious mystery of the missing man contribute to the Ryman's mystique. Elvis's brief, controversial appearance there makes him a small part of that history. He was an outsider who broke the rules, and the Opry is a place that remembers its history, both the bright and the dark. The Phantom remains at large, a ghost in a building full of ghosts. Was there really a Phantom of the Grand Ole Opry? Or were the stories just a collection of unrelated incidents and ghost tales? Did a stagehand really disappear from the Ryman Auditorium? And if so, why is there so little official record of the case? Could the crimes attributed to the Phantom have been an inside job by a disgruntled employee? And what other secrets are held within the historic walls of country music's most famous home? At number 8, who killed the King's co-star's husband? Dodie Stevens was a teenage pop star in the late 1950s. She had a hit song called Pink Shoelaces when she was just 13 years old. Her career was bright. In 1966, she landed a role in an Elvis Presley movie. The film was spin out. Stevens played one of the band members alongside Elvis. She was living a dream, working with the biggest star in the world. After her movie career, she settled down and started a family. She married a man named Carl Schurz. They moved to Missouri and raised their children. In August 1994, their quiet life was shattered. Carl Schurz was found murdered in the garage of their home in the Ozark Mountains. He had been shot multiple times. The murder scene was brutal. It was a clear execution. The police were stumped. There were no signs of forced entry. Nothing was stolen from the house. It was a targeted killing. But who would want to kill Carl Schurz? He was a quiet man, a retired sound engineer. He had no known enemies. The investigation focused on his past. Could there be a secret in his life that led to his murder? The police looked into his business dealings. They interviewed friends and family. Dodie Stevens was devastated. Her life, which had once touched the glamour of Hollywood and Elvis, was now at the center of a grim murder mystery. The police could find no motive. The case grew cold. It remains unsolved to this day. The Elvis connection is through Dodie Stevens. Her story is a stark contrast between two different worlds. One world was the bright, sunny California of Elvis movies. The other was a dark, violent crime in rural Missouri. The murder of her husband is a reminder that tragedy can strike anyone, anywhere. Her past fame as a singer and actress brought some media attention to the case, but it didn't help solve it. The killer was never found. Over the years, speculation has continued. Was it a professional hit? If so, why? Carl Schurz seemed like an unlikely target. Was it a case of mistaken identity? Or was there a secret in his life that no one, not even his wife, knew about? The randomness of the crime is what makes it so chilling. Dodie Stevens, the girl who sang with Elvis, was left to live with a question that has no answer. The shadow of her husband's unsolved murder has followed her for decades. What was the motive for the execution-style murder of Carl Schurz? Could his past in the entertainment industry, however minor, have played a role in his death? Why was nothing stolen if it was a robbery? And how does a person live for decades knowing their spouse's killer is still free? Number 7 was Nick Adams' death a suicide or a Hollywood murder? And Nick Adams was an actor known for his intense, rebellious persona. He was a close friend of James Dean. After Dean's death, Adams cultivated a similar image. He starred in the TV series The Rebel and was nominated for an Academy Award for his role in the 1963 film Twilight of Honor. He was also a friend of Elvis Presley. They met in the 1950s and were part of the same circle of young rising stars. They were photographed together, they socialized together. Adams even claimed to have helped Elvis with his acting. On the night of February 7th, 1968, Nick Adams was found dead in his home in Beverly Hills. He was 36 years old. He was sitting in a chair in his bedroom, fully dressed. The official cause of death was suicide by drug overdose. The coroner found a mix of sedatives in his system. His career had been in decline. He had a history of erratic behavior. On the surface, suicide seemed plausible, but many people, including his family and some investigators, believed he was murdered. The scene was strange. There was no suicide note. There were no pill bottles or glasses near the body. The phone line had been cut. His friend, the actor Robert Conrad, was one of the first people on the scene. He has always maintained that it didn't look like a suicide. The door was locked from the inside, but a window was open. Some people believe the scene was staged to look like a suicide. If it was murder, who would want to kill Nick Adams? One theory involves his writing. Like Krista Helm, Adams was rumored to be writing a tell-all book about Hollywood. He was known for his gossip. He knew secrets about many powerful people. He claimed to have diaries detailing the private lives of stars. Was he killed to prevent the book from being published? Another theory involves a doctor who was known for providing drugs to celebrities. Adams had reportedly threatened to expose this doctor. The Elvis connection is part of the Hollywood milieu. Adams was part of Elvis's social circle during a specific time. He knew the people Elvis knew. He knew the secrets of the town. Biographer Darwin Porter wrote a book called The Rebel and the King, which details the close and complex relationship between Adams and Elvis. The book suggests Adams knew things about Elvis that could have been damaging to his image. This is all speculation, of course, but the theory that Adams was silenced because of what he knew has persisted for over 50 years. His death is one of those Hollywood mysteries that has never been fully explained. The official ruling is suicide. The whispers say it was murder. Why were there no pill bottles found near Nick Adams' body if he died of an overdose? Who cut the phone line to his house? Was he really writing a tell-all book? And if so, what happened to the manuscript? And could his friendship with Elvis Presley have led him to learn a secret that ultimately cost him his life? Number 6 was Jesse Garon's death, a tragic homage to the King's lost twin. Elvis Presley had a twin brother. His name was Jesse Garon Presley. He was stillborn on January 8th, 1935, just 35 minutes before Elvis was born. The loss of his twin haunted Elvis for his entire life. He always felt that a part of him was missing. He often spoke about Jesse. He felt a deep spiritual connection to the brother he never knew. The name Jesse Garon became a sacred part of the Elvis mythology. In the 1990s, there was a musician who was also haunted by the name Jesse Garon. He was an American singer living in England. His birth name is not widely known. He adopted the name Jesse Garon as his stage name. He was an aspiring rock star. He was also deeply troubled. He struggled with mental health issues. He was obsessed with the idea of being the reincarnation of Elvis's dead twin. His life was an attempt to live out the life that Jesse Garon Presley never had. On March 13, 1998, this modern-day Jesse Garon was found dead in his apartment in Bath, England. He was 33 years old. The circumstances of his death were bizarre. He was found in a bathtub filled with water. A toaster was in the tub with him, it appeared to be a clear case of suicide by electrocution. But the details were strange. The police investigation was brief. They quickly ruled it a suicide. But was it? Some people who knew him were not so sure. His obsession with Elvis and his twin was all-consuming. His mental state was fragile. Could he have been taken advantage of? His death has become a strange footnote in the history of Elvis fandom. It's an example of how the power of Elvis's story can have a profound, and sometimes tragic, effect on people's lives. The man who called himself Jesse Garon tried to become a part of the Elvis legend, and he ended up as a strange, unsolved mystery. While officially a suicide, the lack of a thorough investigation and the bizarre nature of the scene have left some with lingering doubts. Was there someone else in the apartment that day? The case is not actively investigated. It's closed, but the questions remain. The Elvis connection here is total and tragic. This is not a tangential link. This is the story of a man who so completely absorbed the Elvis myth that it ultimately consumed him. His death is a dark reflection of the themes of loss and identity that run through Elvis's own life story. The death of Jesse Garon Presley was the first great tragedy of Elvis's life. The death of the man who took his name is a strange and sad echo of that original loss. Why was the police investigation into Jesse Garon's death so brief? Were there any signs of a struggle or forced entry at his apartment? Could his obsessive and unstable personality have made him a target for someone who wished to harm him? Or is his death simply the tragic, final act of a man who was lost in the shadow of a king? Number 5, did the Texarkana Phantom inspire the King of Rock and Roll? In the spring of 1946, a wave of terror swept over the twin cities of Texarkana, on the border of Texas and Arkansas. A hooded killer, known as the Phantom Killer, began attacking couples on lonely lovers' lanes. The attacks were brutal. The killer would stalk his victims, then attack them in their cars. Over a period of 10 weeks, he attacked 8 people. 5 of them were killed. The town was gripped by fear. People armed themselves. They stayed home at night. The Texas Rangers were called in to help with the massive manhunt. The killer was never caught. The case remains one of America's most terrifying unsolved serial killer mysteries. The 1976 movie, The Town That Dreaded Sundown, was based on these events. At the time of the murders, Elvis Presley was an 11-year-old boy living in Tupelo, Mississippi. He would soon move with his family to Memphis, Tennessee. Both cities are only a few hours' drive from Texarkana. The Phantom Killer was a huge news story across the entire South. It was the kind of terrifying, real-life bogeyman story that a young, impressionable boy would have heard about. The image of the hooded killer, the fear, the attacks on young people, it was the dark side of the post-war American dream. The connection to Elvis is cultural and psychological. Some writers and cultural historians have suggested that the anxieties of that era helped shape the music that was to come. Rock and roll was a rebellion. It was about breaking rules. It was about the night. It was about the very things that the Phantom Killer had turned into a source of terror. And Elvis's music, with its raw energy and its sense of danger, was an antidote to the clean-cut conformity of the 1950s. But it also tapped into something darker. Songs like Heartbreak Hotel, with its lonely, desperate atmosphere, feel like they could have been written about the fear that stalked the back roads of the South. This is not to say that Elvis was directly thinking about the Phantom Killer when he was singing. The connection is deeper than that. It's about the cultural soil from which he emerged. The unsolved murders in Texarkana were a part of the Southern experience of his generation. They were a real-life horror story that showed the darkness that could lie beneath the surface of peaceful small-town life. And Elvis's revolution was a musical one, but it was born from the same world that produced the Phantom. The case itself remains a complete mystery. There have been many suspects over the years, but no one was ever charged. The identity of the hooded man who terrorized Texarkana in 1946 is still unknown. How much did the regional news stories of his youth, like the Phantom Killer, influence the themes and moods of Elvis's later music? Is there a connection between the real-life fears of one generation and the rebellious art of the next? Who was the Texarkana Phantom Killer, and why did he stop as suddenly as he began? And could he have lived out the rest of his life, an anonymous figure who was once the most feared man in America? Number 4, who murdered the impersonator's wife? The world of Elvis impersonators is a strange subculture. For some, it's a fun hobby. For others, it's a serious profession. They study his moves, his voice, his style. They compete in contests. They perform all over the world. But for one tribute artist, this world of fantasy collided with a brutal reality. In June 2002, a man named Paul Casey, a well-known Elvis impersonator in the UK, was arrested for the murder of his wife Barbara Ann Scott. The couple lived in a town called Sandiacre in Derbyshire, England. Barbara had been found dead in their home. She had been strangled. The police immediately suspected her husband. Their marriage was reportedly in trouble. They had financial problems. It seemed like a straightforward case of domestic violence. But Paul Casey insisted he was innocent. He had an alibi. He claimed he was at a pub at the time of the murder. Several people backed up his story. The police investigation continued. They looked for other suspects. They found none. The case against Casey seemed to be the only one they had. He was charged with murder and went to trial. The jury could not reach a verdict. A second trial was ordered. Again, the jury was deadlocked. The judge declared a mistrial. Paul Casey was set free. The case remains officially unsolved. The police have never charged anyone else with the murder of Barbara Ann Scott. For the public and for Barbara's family, there has been no justice. The cloud of suspicion has always remained over her husband. But without a conviction, he is legally an innocent man. The story is a tragic one. A woman was killed in her own home, and no one has ever been held accountable. The Elvis connection is the bizarre backdrop to the crime. Paul Casey's life was dedicated to imitating Elvis. Their home was reportedly like a shrine to the king. The murder investigation played out against a surreal setting. Tabloid newspapers in the UK had a field day with the story. Elvis impersonator in murder trial. The headlines wrote themselves. The case highlights the strange, sometimes dark side of obsessive fandom. The line between performance and reality can become blurred. For Barbara Ann Scott, the fantasy world her husband inhabited ended in a real-life tragedy. If Paul Casey did not kill his wife, then who did? Was there an intruder? And if so, what was the motive? Why have the police been unable to find any other leads in the case for all these years? And what is it like to live a life trying to be someone else only to be accused of a crime that remains forever unsolved? Number 3 was Gladys Presley's death an accident or something worse. Gladys Presley was the center of Elvis's world. He was her only surviving child, and she adored him. Their bond was incredibly close. Elvis called her by the pet name Satnin. He bought her a pink Cadillac. He bought her the Graceland mansion. All his success was in his mind for her. But as Elvis's fame grew, Gladys's health declined. She was uncomfortable with the chaos of his celebrity. She was a simple countrywoman, and she was lost in the whirlwind. She became depressed and started drinking heavily. In August 1958, while Elvis was in the army and stationed in Germany, Gladys became seriously ill. She was diagnosed with acute hepatitis. Her condition worsened quickly. She was hospitalized in Memphis. Elvis was granted emergency leave to fly home to be with her. He arrived just in time. Gladys Presley died on August 14, 1958. She was only 46 years old. Elvis was completely devastated. At her funeral, he threw himself over a coffin, crying out in grief. He told friends he would never be happy again. Many people believe he never truly recovered from her death. The official cause of death was a heart attack complicated by liver failure due to hepatitis. But for years, there have been whispers and alternative theories. Some of these theories suggest her death was not so straightforward. One theory, promoted in some sensational biographies, is that she died from an overdose of diet pills. In the 1950s, amphetamines were commonly prescribed for weight loss. Gladys was self-conscious about her weight and was known to be taking them. The theory suggests she may have accidentally or intentionally taken a fatal dose. Another, darker theory points to medical malpractice. It suggests that the doctors treating her made a mistake, and that this mistake was covered up to avoid a scandal involving the world's biggest star. There is no hard evidence to support these theories. They remain in the realm of speculation. But they persist because the official story has always felt incomplete to some. She was young, her decline was rapid, and her death had such a profound and lasting negative impact on her famous son. Her death is not an unsolved crime in the legal sense. No one was ever charged. No official investigation was ever opened. But for some, it remains an unsolved mystery. It was a pivotal moment in Elvis's life. The loss of his mother left a void that he tried to fill with fame, with women, with drugs. But nothing ever worked. The mystery of her death, whether real or imagined, is a part of the tragedy of Elvis Presley. It was the first, and perhaps the deepest, cut of all. What was the real state of Gladys Presley's physical and mental health in the years leading up to her death? How much did the pressure of her son's fame contribute to her decline? Were diet pills a factor in her death? And if so, was this information deliberately kept from the public? Or are the conspiracy theories just another sad attempt to make sense of a tragedy that broke the king's heart? Number 2, what really happened on the Lisa Marie? On February 6, 2023, the Presley family gathered for a memorial service at Graceland. It was for Lisa Marie Presley, Elvis's only child, who had died suddenly a few weeks earlier at the age of 54. The official cause of death was later revealed to be a small bowel obstruction, a complication from a previous weight loss surgery. But in the days leading up to that memorial, a strange and tragic event took place on board the family's private jet, the Lisa Marie. As the family was flying from California to Memphis for the service, Lisa Marie's son, Benjamin Keough, had died by suicide in 2020. He was 27, the family was still reeling from his death. Then, during this flight to his mother's memorial, another tragedy almost struck. Lisa Marie's ex-husband, Danny Keough, who was on the plane with their daughter, Riley, and Lisa Marie's twins, reportedly had some kind of breakdown. Accounts from various media outlets like TMZ reported that he began to say strange and alarming things. He apparently claimed that he could see his late son Benjamin. He also allegedly tried to take control of the cockpit. The details are murky. The Presley family has never publicly confirmed the full story. But reports suggest the situation was serious enough that the pilots had to restrain Danny Keough. It was a moment of intense crisis, happening at a time of unimaginable grief. The family was flying to bury Lisa Marie, and they were faced with another potential disaster at 30,000 feet. This is not an unsolved crime, but it is an unsolved mystery. What exactly happened on that plane? Was it a grief-induced psychological break, or was something else going on? The event was never officially investigated as a crime. It was handled as a private family matter. But it adds another layer of tragedy and strangeness to the Presley family story. The legacy of Elvis has been one of incredible highs and devastating lows. The story of the flight on the Elisa Marie is a modern chapter in that ongoing saga. It's a reminder that the grief and the pressures that haunted Elvis continue to echo through the generations. The connection to Elvis is the plane itself. The Elisa Marie was his private jet, a symbol of his incredible success. He named it after his daughter. For it to be the setting for such a moment of modern family crisis is a strange and sad irony. The mystery is not about what is legally provable, it's about the human drama that we will never fully understand. What was the true nature of the incident on board the Lisa Marie jet? How did the flight crew manage to de-escalate such a dangerous situation? What does this event say about the immense and lasting pressure of being part of the Presley family? And how much of the family's private turmoil has remained hidden from the public eye over the decades? Number 1, was the king's death a cover-up? The biggest unsolved mystery connected to Elvis Presley is his own death. On August 16, 1977, Elvis was found unconscious on the floor of his bathroom at Graceland by his girlfriend Ginger Alden. He was rushed to the hospital, but it was too late. Elvis Presley was dead at the age of 42. The world was stunned. The official cause of death, announced by the medical examiner, was cardiac arrest. His heart had simply given out. But almost immediately, that story began to fall apart. Everyone knew Elvis was in poor health. He was overweight and heavily dependent on prescription drugs. His doctors were prescribing him massive quantities of painkillers, sedatives, and uppers. Dr. George Nicopolis, known as Dr. Nick, was his primary physician. In the last year of Elvis's life, he had prescribed him over 10,000 doses of various drugs. Was his death really a natural cardiac event, or was it a drug overdose? The original autopsy was a mess. The Presley family, wanting to protect Elvis's image, had a private autopsy performed. The results were sealed. The public was told that drugs were not a major factor. But the toxicologists on the case found high levels of multiple prescription drugs in his system, including codeine, Valium, and Demerol. One of the lab technicians later claimed it was a clear case of a massive drug overdose. This has led to decades of debate and conspiracy theories. The most prominent theory is that Elvis's death was a direct result of the prescription drugs, and that this fact was deliberately covered up by his family and his doctor to avoid a scandal. Dr. Nick was later charged with overprescribing drugs to Elvis and other patients. He was acquitted of criminal charges, but his medical license was eventually revoked. He always maintained that he was trying to help Elvis manage his chronic pain and insomnia, not harm him. The case is a legal and medical mystery. Is it possible to die of a heart attack that is triggered by long-term prescription drug abuse? Yes. Is that different from a straightforward overdose? Yes. The line is blurry. The official death certificate lists cardiac arrhythmia as the cause, but what caused the arrhythmia? Was it his poor diet and lifestyle, or was it the powerful cocktail of drugs he was taking every single day? The book Elvis: The Final Years by Jerry Hopkins and the more recent work by author Sally Hodel, Elvis Destined to Die Young, explore these questions in detail. Hodel argues that Elvis had a number of underlying genetic health problems that made him vulnerable, and that the drugs were his way of coping with chronic pain from these conditions. This paints a more sympathetic picture than that of a simple junkie, but it doesn't erase the role of the drugs in his death. The death of Elvis Presley is the ultimate cold case of popular culture. The key evidence, the full and unredacted autopsy report, is sealed until 2027. Until then, we only have speculation. Was it an accident? Was it a slow-motion suicide? Or was it, as some have argued, a form of medical manslaughter with doctors enabling his addiction until it finally killed him? The king is dead. The questions about how and why are very much alive. What is contained in the sealed autopsy report that could change the official story of Elvis's death? To what extent was Dr. Nikopoulos responsible, either legally or morally, for the death of his most famous patient? Could Elvis have been saved if someone in his inner circle had intervened more forcefully? And when the autopsy is finally unsealed in 2027, will we finally get the truth, or just more questions?